Storing your fabric, how exactly do you do that? I think that's probably one of the most common things in a sewing room is, of course, fabric. And how do you store it? Everybody struggles with that. You want to put it somewhere where you can get to it easily and see what you have and have it organized, but you also want to protect it and keep it clean, free from dust, and keep it where you'll have it for many, many years to come. Because everyone needs to keep that fabric stash, and it sometimes becomes a large stash, which you want to be sure and keep. So let me show you what I do. I have big pieces of fabric organized on bookcases back behind these fabric covers, but I first want to show you what I have up above. And I keep my fabric scraps in primarily two totes up above. One of them I keep smaller scraps in, and I keep little pieces that I have from previous projects, such as little quilt blocks like this that I have extra of, or smaller pieces of fabric. This is probably an 8 or 12 inch square. I can use these easily for applique if I need them, if I need just a little piece of fabric to match color wise or to use on a little bit of a quilt block or something. I have little pieces like this. They're still good, you don't want to throw them away, but you want to hang on to them. So I keep one tote with small fabric scraps, which I put up here. Then I have another tote that has large fabric scraps in it. And what I determine as a large fabric scrap is something that is 1/4 yard or a little bit smaller than that. Fat quarters, 1/4 yard is small enough that I really don't have room for it in my bookcases of fabric, but I want to keep it because I could definitely use it for something. I could use, like this is a little 1/4 yard piece of fabric. I could use this for quilt binding, I could use it for some sassing strips on a wall hanging. I could even stitch some embroidery on this to use for a pillow and then do some borders around it. So I could use these for scraps, for samples if I need them, or for little projects. I certainly don't want to throw them away. They're a little bit too large for my small scraps tote, but they're still a little too small where I want to file away with the rest of my fabric. So I have a tote that has large fabric scraps in it. And those are my two totes up above my main fabric collection. I started out with a few pieces of fabric and my collection grew and grew and grew. I needed some way to organize them so I could see what I had and how I could use all of it. So I found a couple of inexpensive bookcases, and what I actually did is put fabric covers over them to cover up what I had inside. Mainly, you want to be able to cover up your fabric for a couple different reasons. You want to be sure to keep it clean, so the fabric covers serve that purpose. You also want to be sure and keep it out of the light to protect it from fading. So be sure that you have something to cover it up to protect it from the light. The other reason you want to be able to cover it is there may be some people in your house that you really don't want them to know how much fabric you have in your collection. And so it's nice that you can close the doors or close the shades and cover up all that fabric. So what I actually did is created fabric covers that I can raise and I can lower at any time. I have it so my cording that I can lock it in place and actually keep them open. And as I found out, this is actually much better than having doors, wooden doors like you would on a bookcase or something. Because with fabric shades you can raise them and they're all up here out of the way. You can lock them in place. You've got plenty of room around you to maneuver and get in and out of your fabric. If you had doors on these that open like this, when you had these open, your doors would be standing out here and in the way. If I had a really, really small sewing room, the doors could cause a problem because there may not be room to open them, or there may not be room to keep them open when I'm working on a project. So actually the fabric shades work very, very nicely. So how do I store my fabric? Well, these bookcases are about 12 inches deep, and so it's really easy to store my fabric in there. I group them into groups of 3 per shelf, and I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shelves per bookcase. I actually have 2 different bookcases, and I have 2 different pieces of fabric in each one. This first bookcase has all of my solids, batiks, and marbles in it. The second one has all of my prints, and also it has flannels down at the bottom. So how exactly do I determine what's a print, what's a solid? Well, it's pretty easy to determine most of your prints. Solids, of course, are going to be solids, and tone-on-tones and marbles. Some of them are a little iffy. The main thing that I use to determine whether I put it on the solid side or the print side is machine embroidery. Now, I do a lot of things with machine embroidery, and that's what I use the majority of my fabric for, whether I'm creating a quilt or whatever. It usually has machine embroidery in it. So, I will look at a piece of fabric, and if it is busy enough and I stitch an embroidery design on it and it's too busy, it's too muddled up, it looks too busy once that design is stitched, it's going to go on the print side. If it looks fine and I know it's going to stitch embroidery designs really well and the embroidery is going to show up on that solid or tone-on-tone fabric, it goes on my solid side. The other criteria that I use is if I run out of room in a pile, then it goes to the other side in whatever color theme it is. So I have my solids here, my prints here. Let's look at the